Hey everyone, welcome back to my reading of Shattered Silence by Melissa G. Moore. I have really been into deep diving into Melissa G. Moore lately just because of her new show that's out. And if you guys want to watch my opinions on it, I have a video over on my TikTok. But the long and short of it is that this new show, people were telling me, oh my god, it's so much like the book it's supposed to be. I was reading reviews and it was saying that like it was supposed to be a lot like the book and it was supposed to be based off that, which would have made sense, right? But no, it's not. A lot of it is fictionalized. She changes the victims' names in the movie, which speaks volumes because they most likely had to ask their permission and they most likely said no, considering that this woman, Melissa G. Moore, Keith Jesperson's daughter, doesn't really care about exposing the victim. She only cares about exploiting herself and making herself money. So that's very apparent. And basically the show is based off of, I guess, her father confessing to another murder. I haven't really deep dived into that portion because I've been working a lot on my podcast, but supposedly that's what takes place, and she is seen as the hero because she's working with one of the, I believe it was Dr. Oz, when she worked with Dr. Oz, and she changes like her positions. And I don't know, I just feel like if you wanted to make this show, because she is a part of making it, maybe she should have just spoke her truth instead of making a fictionalized show and not like giving the victims' families that opportunity to showcase their grief. I don't know, just my opinion. Alright, so let's get to it, guys. Let's get this book over with. We only have like 10 more, 11, 12 more chapters. So yeah, so Shattered Silence by Melissa G. Moore, the untold story of a serial killer's daughter. We are on chapter 30, Bliss and Agony. One day, shortly before my siblings and I left for Seattle, I headed to the downtown library on the bus. I had overheard a couple of cryptic conversations at home and had read a few things in a newspaper before it was swept quickly from the house. It was time to find out what was going on in my own family. I was tired of feeling like I was always flying blind. Entering the large library, I hesitated, almost losing my nerve. I didn't know much about what I was doing, but I decided that it was worth a try. I was too afraid to ask for help, fearful that someone would want to know who I was and why I was looking. It took me a couple hours, but I found what I was looking for. I was shocked to learn that my father had confessed to the murder of Tanya Bennett and even other murders that included his fiancée, Julie. No way, I thought. They've already captured the killers and they are behind bars. A very big part of me wanted to believe that my father was just being crazy. He had never killed Tanya Bennett. Someone else had killed Julie, and he was trying to take the fall for that too. A small but rational part of me knew that this was really not the case. Something floated to my consciousness unbidden. I remembered when I stayed with my dad the very last time we were in Portland. We drove by a tavern and Dad mentioned that he liked to play pool there. He made an off-color remark about the bar women and something about others' uses for his stick. Later, while we were camping, he told a story about sitting on his and Tony's porch. One day, I saw a cat walking by, he said mischievously. I watched the cat. I caught the cat and then I killed it. He had paused for effect. Then I saw a woman jogging by. I watched the woman. I caught the woman. And then... He didn't finish. We all cried, "Oh, gross, Dad. Sick." At the memory of that story, I began to tremble uncontrollably, dropping the copy of the newspaper I held in my hands. I thought it was a campfire story. I thought it wasn't real. Because of the memory, I was driven to do more research into the Tanya Bennett case. I only felt marginally better. She had never been jogging by Dad's and Tony's house, but she had met him at the tavern he had pointed out to us. It sparked another memory. I remembered I had seen a small splatter of blood on the ceiling of Tony's front room. I thought that it was weird, so when I came home, I told my mother about it. Other things my dad had told me ripped through my mind. Other stories, the duct tape in his sleeper, under his pillow. Suddenly, I didn't want to know a single other detail. I didn't want to know who my father's victims were, how he had met them, or what had happened to them. It was like a switch went off in my brain. I walked out of the library cold and numb. I didn't remember how I got home. I was done dealing with my father's murders. I had to be, or I would go crazy. The trip to Seattle on the Greyhound bus was surprisingly short. It brought back happy memories of when Jason, Carrie, and I were creating new adventures in our alfalfa field. On the trip, we looked out for one another, honored one another, and enjoyed each other's company. Once again, though not the oldest, Jason captained his adventure and watched over us with a careful eye. Most people were nice, but there were few unseemingly characters on different legs of the journey that tried to strike up a conversation with pretty little Carrie or with me. Jason, who sat between us, let them know we were not available to talk. So that's kind of, it's funny because she like pauses. It's like pretty little Carrie or with me. Like, it feels like it's attention grabbing, again, only in my opinion. I found out that Carrie and her friends had collected some newspaper clippings of our father, his confessions, and his crimes. Whenever she had something new, she shared it with Jason. So between the three of us, we had about the same amount of knowledge. It wasn't much, but at least we were completely ignorant. That felt especially good because we were about to arrive smack dab in the middle of our father's family. We arrived in time for the preparation for Susan's wedding. My cousin was 10 years older than me and happily in love with her beau, Tom. Her mother, Clara, my other aunt, Anne, and Susan herself all spent the next few days bustling around in preparation. There was a great deal of excited anticipation in the air, and the adults attempted to include us in as many of the preparations as possible, not wanting us to feel left out. They had no idea what we were blissfully happy just to be in their presence. Here, we did not have to find ways to escape or survive. If we looked uncomfortable, it was because our home life was so different from others, and from long habit, we were still trying to figure out the rules. It took us a few days to just relax. Although no one mentioned my father, I could feel their anger at my father's actions, their shame for his dishonoring our family. I could also feel great sadness that he would never be free to be my father, enjoy family holidays, or give me away when it was time for my own wedding. So again, we go back to, like, you visibly see your father's family, his parents, his siblings, his cousins, uncles, nieces, nephews. You clearly see that they are not handling this well, but yet you still think in the back of your, in my opinion, sick and twisted mind that your father was going to want to even walk you down the aisle when you get married. Like, that don't make no kind of sense to me. And again, I do get that this happened and they were young and they still knew their father as their father. But again, it goes back to your father was already traumatizing you way before this. So why the lovingly nice gestures of thinking of the future that could have been with your dad? You know what I mean? Like, in my mind, I would just, in this time, I would come to terms with the fact that I would never speak to my father again and I want nothing to do with him. But again, that is just me. So aunts Clara and Anne were such strong women who had control of their lives. I watched them carefully. Through their example, I came to realize that I could be just as strong as they were. Surrounded by their love, I felt like I was absorbing their strength as well. Aunt Clara knew I enjoyed hairstyling, and she even let me cut her hair. I knew she was scared, but she didn't show it. She gave me perfume as a gift for my services. My aunts made me feel that I had talents, that I was a contribution and not a burden. Again, we're going back to being with her mother, that in shows Melissa Moore talks so highly of, but in this book does not. Just saying. My grandfather was the surprising anomaly. When he came up for the wedding, he cried all the time, and I thought it was strange to see this old Western tough guy breaking down. It caused tears to come from me as well, because I was really sad. But I didn't know how to let my sadness out. Each day I stuffed my emotions down, except when it was safe to be vulnerable enough to cry. In other words, I had to be alone to do it. When my grandfather hugged me, I felt his huge coat of love surround me. I also felt his pain, which was overwhelming in its magnitude and in my inability to do anything about it. All in all, they said little or nothing about my father except my cousin Christy. While in town for the wedding, I was staying in her room, and we talked one night for a while. She could tell that I was not myself, and like everyone else, she assumed that it had to do with the shocking news of my father. It was easy to pretend that this was the case, although I could tell I was still suffering from the loss of my child. I was mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. I felt fragile and tender and still broken. I'm sure for other people it was like being in the presence of a zombie. For many days I felt like I was the walking dead. Hesitantly, Christy broached the subject with me. Unlike my own family, Christy's and Susan's families had talked somewhat open about my father, before we arrived at least. Did you know that Susan used to call your dad Mean Uncle Keith? Christy asked thoughtfully. She said it was because he would tease her all the time. He teased her about her hair, about how she looked. It was like he enjoyed torturing her. She paused and cocked her head to one side as if puzzled. What I remember is a lot of people being furious with him for stupid things. Then the next thing I knew, he would be doing something really nice for someone. You know, going way out of the way to do it. Melissa, was it like that for you? I nodded, but I found I couldn't speak much about it. My zombie form didn't talk much about the Jekyll and Hyde experience I had had with my dad. When we shifted the conversation to other things like the wedding, I found it easier to talk. It was also easier to breathe. So it's kind of telling of what his own family thought about him even beforehand. And I want to make this very clear. If you are abused as a child, or if you are neglected in any way, shape, or form, you don't murder people. That's not normal. That's not a normal response to what happened to you in your past. Before the wedding, I had the opportunity to spend a little one-on-one time with Susan. She chatted nonstop about the wedding and her sweetheart. For whatever reason, it was surprisingly healing to see that life hadn't stopped just because Dad was in jail. Things were still moving forward all around us. Lives and relationships still moved ahead. Maybe I could too, if I could figure out how. Susan showed me her beautiful, elaborate wedding dress and her shoes, as well as her veil and all the small intricacies of her attire. "What are we going to wear to the wedding, Melissa?" she asked, turning the conversation kindly to me. My face fell. The last dress I had gotten was when Mom got married, and that was ages ago. When I had attempted to try it on, it had been way too small, especially after my recent experiences. Instead, I had put two of my nicest school items together to form some kind of outfit. It wasn't fancy, but it was all I had. That will be wonderful, Susan assured me when I showed her, and I smiled. She must have mentioned something to my mother because Clara took the three of us shopping the next day for suitable wedding attire. She brought me a beautiful burgundy shift that tied in the back and some matching white shoes. It was a special treat to have something new and lovely, and it spoke of hope. The wedding was absolutely stunning, and it was delightful to be around so many of our family members who we had felt estranged from for so long. No one mentioned my father. It was as if he didn't exist. Susan and David left for their honeymoon ecstatically happy. I was such a romantic. I was glad for Susan to have found her happily ever after. So we have mentioned in this chapter so far, and I've only read like 2 to 3 pages, that no one mentioned your father at least 5 times already. And I'm pretty sure we're going to hear it a little bit more while you're out there visiting this family. And they don't need to mention your father. For one, people that are decent aren't going to be like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your father. And the thing is that you should have not even been thinking about your father at this point. You know what I mean? Like, considering what he had already put you guys through, and now you're putting 2 and 2 together with going to the library and all of that stuff, you should let it be and just move on. Like, for real. Deal with the other issues that you're currently having. A few days after the wedding, things had settled down considerably, and there wasn't the same frantic pace we had experienced before. We were now staying with Aunt Anne in Bellevue, planning a few more fun excursions around the area. At breakfast, she looked carefully at Jason and me. Carrie had eaten like a jackrabbit and, as usual, had run off to play. She didn't feel the same desperate need for food that Jason and I had often felt. We noticed that Anne and the rest of the family had made sure we always had access to good meals while we were there. My Aunt Anne was also loving and affectionate to us, and it was delightful to be in her presence. I found her studying us today, though, and it made me a little nervous. I've been thinking about your father, said Anne. He's in the Clark County Jail in Vancouver. What would you think about going to see him today? She asked. Jason dropped his fork but picked it up again quickly. We glanced at each other, a little protective of our feelings. This was the most openly we had talked about Dad with a grown-up ever. We shrugged at about the same time. Sure, I said. It might do us all some good to have some answers, she said quietly. On the 2-hour drive down, Anne had discussed with us some of the rules of the jail. Although they were understandable, some of them caught me off guard. For example, girls couldn't wear underwire bras. That made sense to me. But I only owned one bra, and of course it was an underwire. I wondered if I was really supposed to go, but I spoke to my aunt and we handled it. When we arrived, we found that Clark County facility was not friendly, though I hadn't expected it to be. We learned that years prior, the notorious child killer Wesley Allen Dodd had been arrested and booked into the same facility as my father. Dodd was later hanged for his crimes at the Walla Walla prison. We were ushered into the room that was lined with booths between glass walls. My heart beat heavily in my chest. I hadn't seen my dad in several months, since the day of our conversation at breakfast. I didn't know what to expect. Jason was nervous as well. The door on the other side of the glass wall opened and an officer came in first. leading a whole line of inmates dressed in orange jumpsuits. My father, always easy to spot with his build, sat down in a chair and we walked over and to sit across from him. The telephone at each station was the only way to communicate, so it was necessary to speak one at a time. Anne went first. "Why, Keith?" she asked him, attempting to keep her cool in front of us. "Why are you here?" I think more than any of Dad's brothers and sisters, Anne still held some vestige of hope that her brother wasn't capable of such atrocities. She was demanding an explanation and fighting back tears. At some point during their conversation, I think she wanted him to wake up and to what he had done. He looked at us, and it was the first time he had shown any remorse, I think. According to his letters, the media before and after his arrest, he didn't seem to care about how his aftermath affected any of us. He only seemed obsessed with was his reputation as a killer. Anne pulled the phone away from her ear and looked at us. It was obvious she didn't get the answers she was hoping for, but she seemed to have gotten some closure. As my dad talked to her on the phone, from time to time, he would look at me and Jason. I was still getting over the shock of seeing my own father in a prison jumpsuit. He looked like a felon. In our eyes, it made it real, and it made it horrible. I was filled with shame. I didn't know someone who had a dad in prison, much less for murder. Serial murder. I let that ring through my head for the first time. My father was a serial murderer. He himself had admitted it. I didn't know all the details, but I knew enough. Flashes of my rape and the other physical abuse I had endured filled my mind. My dad did those things to women and then choked the life out of them. I remember how he would fling animals to the ground after he killed them, as if they were nothing but garbage. He had done that with his victims' bodies, not bothering to clothe them or honor them in any way. Not even his girlfriend. Just tossed them naked down embankments like other people did with their old tires. I began to cry. I could tell Anne and my father thought I was crying for him, but I wasn't. I was angry with him. I felt alone and seemed like I had been dealt a really unfair hand. I was crying for myself. Despite all I had been through and survived, this was the first time I had felt sorry for myself. I didn't like it. In the past, I had almost always felt hope for a brighter future. Suddenly, I remembered the feeling and experiences I'd had when I prayed on my little cot. I spoke another prayer in my heart to be able to make it through this, to be able to learn from it and create something different from the sheer and utter hopelessness I was experiencing now. Of course, because it's going to get you ahead in life. Fast forward, time jump in. So, again, my opinion. It was my turn to pick up the phone. I didn't know what to say. "I'm so sorry, Melissa," my father said, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Were they real?" "I really let you down," he went on. "I wish I could make things different for you. We're not going to have those fun summers together anymore. I'm going to be here for a long, long time. I'm sorry." I stared at him. My anger, my sadness, and my shame for what he had done all boiled within me. "What am I going to do, Dad?" I cried, the tears streaming down my face. "You took away our lives together. You were supposed to get us away from our stepfather. What am I supposed to do?" As the oldest child, his leaving had put in charge of Jason and Carrie. Mom was unable to protect them, and that made me even angrier. Some teenagers that thought they were invincible, but I had learned that you're just how breakable I was. How was I supposed to look out for my siblings? "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there to help," was all he could say. I looked at him through my tears. I loved that man, and I hated him. I hated what he had done to all of us. Jason got on the phone for a short time. He asked his questions and mostly listened to my father. Abruptly, the guard said it was time to go and all communications were cut off. For a moment, there was only body language and eye contact when Jason and I had to look away as the guards led my father out. There goes my life, was all I could think. That thought seemed to scoop out a big black hole deep inside me. I was abandoned and alone. I was back to being a zombie. The real world wasn't real to me anymore. I didn't feel like I was in my own life. I felt like my body was there, but my soul was living somewhere else. On the way home, Anne mentioned that the jail was going to be expanding its capacity from listed at 461, but it generally had 462 inmates going in and out, except for my dad. The only place he would be going to once he left there was straight to prison. And we wondered if, like Wesley Allen Dodd, he had something else in store for him, because it was safe, because we were with Anne. Jason and I cried for most of the way back to Seattle. So basically, she's worried that he's going to get the death penalty. And again, it's just like it gives that whole like thing of you saying like, there goes my life. Like, what? Like, excuse me? I digress. We're gonna go into chapter 31, which is Song of Hope. On my way back home, we took a side trip to Yakima to see family and a few old friends. Gavin happened to be there at the time visiting his family too. From his behavior, it seemed like he still liked me. He promised to keep in touch, but he had promised that 2 summers in a row. I didn't bet on it. I didn't bet on anyone liking me because I didn't feel like I deserved it. I wanted it badly, desperately, but I wondered if what Sean had told me was true. No one else will ever want you, Melissa, he had said ruthlessly. You're used goods now. Sean's words rang out often in my head. I had finally had to give up on guys. I decided that all I wanted to do was go to school and make a better life for myself. If I was successful, surely someone would want me. All I knew was I was determined for life to change. When I got home that summer, I discovered that I had more courage to speak about our circumstances and living conditions. What are we still doing here? I asked my mother when we returned to Grandma Francis's. After weeks of freedom, it was incredibly crowded for all of us. While Grandma and Uncle Bart lived upstairs, Mom, Robert, me, Jason, Carrie, Uncle Louis, and my half-brother Benjamin were all crammed downstairs in the tiny hole of a basement. In my Aunt Anne's home, I had observed that my cousins didn't have to wonder how they were going to get clothing. It was just provided. They didn't have to worry about where they were going to live. They had warm and clean home, food in the cupboards, and regular vacations. I knew it was not healthy to compare, but this wasn't about comparing. This was about surviving versus thriving. I would not be able to thrive unless I understood the choices that created a thriving life. I observed choices that my aunt made. Although it was hard work, she chose to be a daycare provider, so she would be available when her children got home from school. Her paycheck paid the bills, and when she struggled at times, she chose to keep moving forward with faith that things would work out. For a little while, I resented my cousins for having a safe home. Then I realized it didn't do anyone any good to live in squalor, and their example gave me hope that I, too, could somehow have a healthy and loving lifestyle. Our housing situation seemed like the most important step in the endeavor. It was a very big deal for me. So for quite some time, I had been looking for opportunities for progress, similar to what I had done before we found our Lynchfield home. For me, living in that tiny house felt like a military torture device. It felt as if the world was testing my abilities to survive. I never knew how many months or even years I would have to endure this round of basement living. Maybe if I knew how long I would have to endure it, it might not have been so awful. So how long do you think we have to live here? I asked my mother shortly after we had returned home. However long it takes to find a home, she said resigningly, one that we can afford. One day I found some literature that Habitat for Humanity was building some homes nearby. I didn't understand the entire concept, but from everything I read and saw, I felt like our family would fit the bill. I surprised and pleased when my mother agreed to look into it. The downside, Mom said, was that there was an enormous waiting list. She doubted it would work. And this is another connection this woman has to Gypsy Rose, so listen up. Mom, we can't stay here forever, I pleaded. Don't give up. Look at what it's doing to Jason and Carrie. They're never here. She looked at me and though I had stomped on her face. She looked at me as though I had stomped on her face, then she turned away. I went downstairs in a haze and felt the dark energy start to spread again. I decided to turn to someone I did not know very well, and I abruptly kneeled down beside my cot, my knees carrying my weight on the cool, hard cement. The few times that I had earnestly prayed, I had been given sudden strength to endure another day. In my heart, I knew I had answered my prayers, though not always in the way I had expected. I had wanted my problems to go poof and disappear, but instead I was given peace and the feeling that my burdens had been lifted a little. Now I was again in need of divine source to relieve my feelings of powerlessness. We had only been home for a short while and my hope was already starting to dissipate. I needed the strength to keep enduring because my will to keep going was fading fast. I thought about all the kids at my school and that drank and the ones that did drugs. It would be so easy to slip into that lifestyle. I was preparing to go to a whole new school and I knew I was floundering. God, I feel so alone right now. Is there something I did wrong or missed? Is this a punishment? I'm not sure I can go through any more right now. I need your help. When will this all be over? What is the lesson that I'm missing? Hot tears were running down my cheeks. I remembered a scripture that was read during youth group of the women who secretly touched Jesus' garment. He instantly knew it and turned to ask who had touched his clothing. The woman admitted it was her. In the moment, I fully understood why the woman would reach out just to touch the edge of his garment. If she could just grasp something so small, so brief, then maybe she could have hope again. Please, God, let this be over soon. Please help us help us to have hope in our lives, something to look forward to. Let me feel joy again. Amen. I quickly wiped my tears away, embarrassed for having a breakdown and showing emotion, even though no one was around to see it. I did not like feeling vulnerable and weak, and I was glad that none of my family had come downstairs in the moment of despair. I laid down on my cot and wrapped my sleeping bag around me. I thought about what it would feel like to live in a new home. I thought about clean, bright walls and new carpet and appliances. I thought about not being embarrassed to ask my friends to stay the night or to visit. And I thought about what it would be like for me to feel normal. I pictured how I would decorate my very own room. I could feel the lightness and joy of living in what felt like light. A feeling of something greater in me started to pull through the despair. The more I pictured this bright new home, the more I believed that it was mine and that I would have it in a matter of days. I knew that God was arranging this gift for me in every new minute that passed. I felt freedom to put in all the details that would make this home special and real to me. The more I decorated this home, the more I believed it was mine. In my daydreaming, I imagined how it would feel to walk across clean carpet that had been untouched. I reveled in the freedom to take a long shower without taking from someone else. I believe this was the beginning to the answer to my prayer because I felt the blessing was on its way. My opinion only, but I feel like this is just delulu, not daydreaming. Again, my opinion only. But to each their own, you know? As the days passed, I would add more details to my visionary home. Then one afternoon, I arrived home and was asked to have a seat in Grandma Frances's tiny living room. The air was filled with frantic energy, and my mother and grandmother were busy cleaning all around us. Jason, Carrie, Jonathan, and I were all in one place, which felt rather foreign. I'd hardly seen Jason or Carrie since our return from Seattle. We had all been living separate lives, and now, without explanation, we stared at each other, wondering what the big news was. The bell rang, and the four of us looked at the door in anticipation. 3 people walked into our already crowded living room, a man and 2 women, all dressed professionally, grabbed chairs from the table to join in our circle. My mother and Robert sat next to each other nervously. The strangers looked over at the younger ones in the room. One woman smiled. "Do you know why we're here?" she asked. "No," we answered in unison, our curiosity piqued. "We are from Habitat for Humanity," she said, and my heart leaped inside my chest. "We want to take a look around at your home and determine if you will be receiving a new home." The other 2 broke out into smile at our excited reactions, and the woman went on. "Now there are 7 members in your family, correct?" "No, only 6. Jason and I chimed in quickly. I wondered how she could make that kind of mistake when we were all present for the meeting. I experienced a small ping of fear. What if having less than 7 in our family would disqualify us for a new home? "Yes, 7 is correct," my mother said. I looked at her as if she were a liar. Jason was upset too. My mother pointed at her belly and said, "1 on the way." Wow. Interesting. My initial fear that she wasn't telling the truth turned into something else entirely. How could my mother continue to be intimate with a man who hurt her like Robert did? I couldn't believe it. I put my head down so these people would not see my feelings of humiliation and despair. "Have you ever heard of birth control?" cried Jason. He stormed out of the house. My mother appeared shocked at his outrage, but did not say a word about it. The most important thing, apparently, was for the Habitat for Humanity people to see the entire family together. It had been a huge undertaking to have all of us present at one time. I watched as the Habitat for Humanity people went downstairs. I felt embarrassment creep in as they saw my cot and my shoeboxes. I had to tell myself over and over that they had to see how we lived in order to make their assessment. This is a blessing. Surely, this is a blessing. I had to keep telling that to myself over and over. It was the first time someone had witnessed my living conditions, and it made me very nervous. I never invited anyone into the basement ever. We said goodbye and watched them leave in their nice suits and their clean, pristine car. "Do you think we'll get chosen?" I asked my mom, not doing anything to disguise my rising excitement. "Honey," she sighed, "there are a lot of people on the list. I really don't think so." She had to be wrong. I knew she was wrong because the minute they told me who they were, I felt this was the answer to the prayers for a home. Somehow I knew that God would not allow this dream to be taken away from me. "I know we're going to get it," I cried. "I know it." "How do you know that for a fact?" she asked. "It's a strong feeling," I said. "There is no doubt." I thought again of the woman touching the hem of his robe. There is no doubt. Again, I kind of know what this outcome is already, so very close proximity to Gypsy Rose. They both got Habitat for Humanity houses, which for Melissa's mother saying there is a lot of people on the list, there is. During this time frame, like in the 90s, that was a huge thing. Like, people were asking for that, and there was a lot of people that qualified for it because they had sick children or they suffered really hard times and stuff like that. And not to say they're not already, but it looks like to me that her mom is kind of settling for what she's settling for, and she's not really working hard anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know if maybe that's what she's trying to give off here, but that's just what I see. And we're on chapter 32, Sacred Trust. A phenomenon had happened over the last 6 months between finding the fortitude to escape my abuser and feeling the peace of getting away for several weeks. I found that I was not as afraid to speak my mind anymore. I think it was hard on my mother because I wouldn't treat topics like they were taboo. She still did, especially when I spoke openly to her of the abuse she was suffering at Robert's hands. She pointed out that it was not nearly so bad anymore, and I told her I thought that was only because of Grandma and Uncle Bart being around all the time. Despite the fact that he didn't throw her into walls here, his often furious signing and angry looks on his face when we were out, or when there were no other adults around, spoke volumes about the rage he held inside. We had learned to read Robert even if we didn't know sign language. My siblings and I could tell that he was starting to boil when his signing would escalate in pace. Robert's grunts would get louder, sounding like high-pitched gawks. Once it reached that level, anything could happen, and too often in the past it had. When he got that way, my mother would try to reason with the irate man, and it was like shoveling snow during a blizzard. It was useless. I could not understand why she would try to appease him when his requests were most often absurd or trivial. In my opinion, he was like a giant, overweight toddler throwing a fit. The only time Robert's anger seemed to decrease was after he physically assaulted my mom. My refusal to put up with the abuse seemed to spark something in Robert. I found he was stealing my diaries and reading them. This only infuriated me more. I tried different hiding places, and he kept finding them in my private things. I got the feeling that he was reading to see if I mentioned anything about him. So once I did mention something on purpose, I absolutely spoke my mind to protect my siblings. If he was going to continually invade my privacy, I was going to let him have it. I decided to illustrate in my journal a situation my family had experienced with him. I wanted him to see how petty, selfish, and cruel he was. I also wanted to make sure he left my siblings and me alone. I wrote, I cannot understand why my mother puts up with Robert's abusive behavior. I am sick of him pushing her around and throwing her into walls for no reason. In addition, he had stepped out of bounds where my sister is concerned, and if he ever does it again, I will not hesitate to call the cops. When we were supposed to be traveling to Colorado to meet his 2 sons, we stopped at a park near Boise, Ohio, for some dinner. Pressed for time, we decided to eat inside and the station wagon with the doors wide open to invite in some fresh air. It was much needed break from being on the road for 6 hours. Carrie and I first got out of the station wagon to walk around and stretch. Then she decided she wanted to have part of the meal. The fast food bag was sitting in the center of the console, between my mother's seat and Robert's passenger seat. Carrie reached over Robert to grab a sandwich, and he bit her arm. I saw the look on her face, and she pulled it out and burst into tears. Mom looked over at Robert and sighed. What did you do? He then told her in his angry face, fast-paced signing that Carrie had reached across his lap for food, and it was rude. Mom inspected Carrie's wound, and it was horrible. Robert bit the soft, fleshy area so hard, Carrie couldn't stop crying. Her arm was already turning black and blue, and blood oozed where his bite had broken through the skin. I wanted to hit him. Everyone except Robert got back into the station wagon, and Mom drove back to the Albertsons in Boise, where we had picked up our dinner. She said she needed to use the phone and told us to sit in the car and wait for her. Our vacation was over. I was relieved that we would not have to make the long car trip to see Robert's family. To me, he has never been a stepfather, but a dictator and abuser. Somehow Mom was not as convinced as I was. She got back into the station wagon after her call and turned around in the dusk to return to the park where we had left Robert. While sitting in the station wagon, Carrie and I watched as my mother tried to negotiate with the irate man. She gave in his demands, and soon Robert was sitting in the car again and we were headed home. I couldn't believe it. I knew I wouldn't have brought him back to hurt us again. Robert had better not ever, ever, ever touch my sister again, and if he touches me or Jason, the same thing applies. I can't control how my mother feels, but I can protect my brother and sister, and I wouldn't hesitate to do so. I will make sure he goes to jail. What I did not add in my journal was what happened when Robert got back in the car. I had wrapped my arms around my little sister, and we looked at each other with fear. The monster was back in the car again. All we could think was, what else will happen? Would we ever be safe? We had no idea at the time that there were people and resources who could have helped us get out of the abusive situation. Which is understandable because it's in the early 2000s, so I get it. We thought we had to endure whatever Robert dished out. Sometimes it would appear that my mother wanted to do the right thing for us, like leaving Robert, but every time she tried, she would reconsider her stance and return to him. She was as reliable in this as Old Faithful, and I grew angrier every time she went back to him. Jason and I knew was having the hardest time. We couldn't handle seeing what was going on with Mom, and as he got bigger, I worried that sometime he might get in between Robert and her. What would happen then? I was a little worried about writing that about Robert, knowing that it was a matter of time before he read it. When he got angry at us, he took it out on my mother, and I did everything I could to avoid that. Still, I thought he was trying to hide the fact he was reading my journal. I had confronted him about it in front of my mom, and he wouldn't openly admit that he had been reading it. Because of that, I felt like it was safe. In the beginning, I had tried several times to reach out to Robert, but I no longer had any compassion towards him. Appeasing him had only helped him become the dictator he was now, and he was not worth the pain he generously dished out. And to read my journal, not only was that a huge violation of privacy, he had taken away the only tool I had to release the feelings of frustration, resentment, pain, anger, sadness, and abandonment I was feeling during that time. Robert kept going through my things and reading my journal until I finally stopped journaling altogether. Still, I never stopped thinking and feeling what the abusive behavior he exhibited toward my mother was simply unacceptable. Yep. I mean, honestly. And again, I want to just reiterate here, like, Melissa Moore and everything that I've seen about her and been watching about her, she praises her mother. Like, her mother is, like, on a highest pedestal, but this book just does not give that. So, we have so many things that go together that kind of mirror Gypsy Rose's life. The Habitat for Humanity, the wanting to be famous, the need for attention, the me portion of it. And now we go to, like, she really blames her mom, which, if this stuff is true, she blames her mom for a lot of things that she should probably blame her dad for. But I can see her blaming her mom for some things. But again, why are you putting on this facade? I realize that this is years later, but why are you putting on this facade of, like, oh, I love my mom, she's like the best mom ever, or whatever, regardless of if you mended that or not. You obviously wrote it in your book. So, Anyways, thank you guys so much for staying and reading this. I've been reading 3 chapters just because every 3 chapters seem to be like a longer chapter. So that's just how it's been going. So I wanted to, let's see. There's 41 chapters, so we're really close to being done with the book. So if you guys haven't seen the other portions, go in this playlist and review it all. I want to remind you guys to check out my podcast, Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip. I upload episodes every Thursday, and those are update episodes. We talk about different cases, different things that are going on in true crime and conspiracy and gossip. And then on Fridays, I do a deep dive. So I am doing a deep dive, and actually only here, you'll hear this first. I'm going to be doing a deep dive on Angela Green, who went missing. She has still not been found, and they do not have justice for her. So we're going to be deep diving onto that Friday. So if you guys listen, you guys can listen to it first on wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you guys don't listen to podcasts anywhere but here on YouTube, definitely check it out. It will be posted on here shortly after it's published everywhere else. And be sure to subscribe here, guys, because you can get all of that here on this channel. But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and happy Easter to everyone that celebrates. And I hope you guys stay positive, stay awesome, and we'll talk about it next time. Bye, guys.